Hey, so Matt Wyatt's here with us today, and he is a former college athlete, and now he is focusing on sports and his video and broadcasting career. He was the MSU quarterback from 1996 to 1999. He is a former WTVA sports anchor and has been in the Mississippi Business Journal Top 40 Under 40 and is a radio analysis for MSU football. Thanks for being with us, Matt.
Oh, my pleasure. So, what do y'all want to know? I thought that we might take an opportunity to, I might lay a couple things out that are current in our sports world, things I'm talking about on the radio, that kind of thing. But I've kind of found that, the conversation part of it is a lot more interesting usually. So the Q&A, that some people might think that's a cop-out. It's not really, because, on the radio every day doing a talk show, we hope that we get into that every day. When we do a radio show, we hope people call and a lot of people text and they'll tweet during the show, and we kind of have a conversation as opposed to, as I like to put it, sitting up there bloviating for 3 hours. That usually drives people away. If we get a conversation going, it's usually a little more interesting. So maybe we have a chance to get some questions in. I just thought I would kind of start you off by laying a foundation of knowledge, kind of where we are right now in the college football world. We're all in one shape, form, or fashion usually connected to one school or the other, State or Ole Miss, or if it's not one of those two in Mississippi, maybe it's Alabama, Tennessee, LSU. We're paying attention to it. And, a lot of us, even if we're not big sports fans, we may have businesses that are big sports fans, right? Because when football gets going, and especially in our college towns in Starkville and Oxford, but even, our local economy here in Tupelo, there's a lot of people coming to town and stay in hotels, and game weekends in Oxford, game weekends in Starkville, they'll stay here, eat here. Teams come in when we, a lot of times we'll have Nick Saban in Alabama. When they're playing in Oxford, they'll stay down at the Hilton downtown, so it's big business all over the place. So kind of where we are, so I've been, keeping an eye on it every day, is we are inside of 2 weeks now to what is scheduled to be the first game. I think we all know that last weekend in September, the Southeastern Conference slated that date, Saturday the 26th, as, okay, we're going to start playing games on Saturday 26th. And if you remember back a month and a half ago, it was a big deal in the sports world of, the Big Ten and the Pac-12 decided they were not going to play this fall at that time. Other conferences and a few others like Conference USA that Southern Miss is in, the Sun Belt Conference, they said, no, we're going forward. We're going to play our games starting in September. We're going to figure out a way around this virus. And the SEC, the Southeastern Conference, who, whether other people around the country like it or not, everybody looks at the SEC to see what they're going to do on things. They were kind of in between. They were not going to cancel it. They were not going to consider having a football season in the spring, which in my opinion makes no sense at all. It's just not possible. They were going to be somewhere in the middle. We're going to push it back, give ourselves maybe another month to see how things go, to figure out the testing, to see if we can practice, see how that goes, and be ready to play at the end of September. And that's where we are. And so to this point, as of today, unless something changes, everybody's pretty much on track to play football in 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks. I was looking here at Twitter, a friend of mine named Neil McCready, who covers Ole Miss for one of the website rivals, one of the recruiting websites. He tweeted that Lane Kiffin just said a minute ago that in Ole Miss's most recent testing, there were 0 positive tests. And Kiffin said Ole Miss had a couple of players in quarantine, but his quote was, we're almost all the way back, meaning getting all the players back on the field. About 2 weeks ago, he and some other coaches said that they would have had a hard time playing a game at that time if they had to, because not necessarily because of a rash of positive tests of COVID, but because of 1 or 2 positive tests that sent about 20 guys into quarantine because they had all been around them, sort of thing. So I think what we're going to see here, again, unless there's some type of negative development that nobody sees coming, I think what we're going to see is that once again, as has been the case in so many areas, in so many ways, the SEC is setting the standard for how this thing should have been handled by everybody, maybe. Now, having said that, other teams have played and they're doing fine and they're underway. But we've also seen a lot of postponements of games that were scheduled over the last couple of weeks and into this weekend. So I think the SEC pretty much nailed it in their approach. It was a situation where they didn't need to be first to make a decision. They delayed on, let's just wait to the last minute to make a decision if we were going to play or not. Once they made the decision to go ahead and play, they set the date, I think, at the right time, gave them a chance to get their teams ready, get their teams used to all the testing they have to do. So with all that said, we're going to play football on the 26th of this month. State will open up at LSU, and Ole Miss going to open up at home hosting Florida, and we'll have a bunch of other games around the SEC that will happen that weekend. From a radio perspective, y'all may find this interesting. I'm on the radio crew for Mississippi State games as the analyst. Neil Price is our play-by-play announcer, and we have a 3-man crew that broadcast state games on the radio, home and away. And the third man is our sideline reporter named Jay Perry. And some of y'all may know Jay from Starkville. I've been there his whole life. Jay is actually on the staff with the football team. So his full-time job is Jay is kind of an advisor and his actual job title is something along the lines of, I don't even know what it is, but he's basically like a liaison from developing junior and senior football players and then connecting them with NFL scouts and coaches, getting them ready for the combine, all that kind of stuff. So he's kind of a player personnel guy. So he does all that full time. And on game days, he's our sideline reporter on the radio crew. He has radio experience. So this year is going to be different than anything else. In 2 weeks, when we go to LSU, we can't travel with the football team like we normally do. We're going to have to travel separately. But Jay, being a staff member, he'll be on the plane with the football team. He'll stay in their hotel in Baton Rouge. We normally do too, as do family members of coaches, staff members. In the past, we always are all on the plane with them. We fly down, stay in their hotel. But because of COVID, the team and just their team members and staff are flying down to Baton Rouge. They will stay in a hotel by themselves. There will be nobody else in that hotel but that football team. And then folks like us, radio crew, Neil, Price, myself, we got to get down there on our own. And we're going to stay in a separate hotel, separate travel arrangements. And then we won't be around them in the same vicinity as them at all until game day when we go up to the booth and they're actually down on the field. So there are teams around the SEC that in some cases, they are making the decision not to send their radio crew, Randy, to road games. They're actually going to have their radio crew in a studio at home. ESPN down the line will send them an audio feed of what it sounds like naturally in the stadium, and they will mesh that with their broadcast that they will do just watching TVs in the studio back home. So it's a different year for everybody. It's, obviously different if you've watched any games without any fans in the stands. And so it's going to be an entirely different year. That's college. I want to say one thing, and then I'm happy to take a few questions and see what y'all want to know from me. High school football. High school football, not in every part of the country, but here and in Alabama and in Georgia, was the first to come back. They were the first to really say, okay, we're going to proceed forward somehow. They were the first to start practicing, and they were the first to start playing games. And it's gone pretty well. And you see some games where I saw some highlights of the Starkville West Point game in Starkville 2 weeks ago, and maybe my eyes fooled me, but they weren't distancing. That place was full, not 25% capacity. I'm talking about they had about 95% of that thing full on both sides. But so far, no, big deals except places, you had McGee High School has had to quarantine most of their team, and they're going to miss some games. But for the most part across the state, it's gone okay. And in my opinion, among fans, among, the local communities, I just think there is a heightened respect right now out there among a lot of people for the high school coaches, the administrators, the players, the parents, for not only in some cases there's a respect for forging ahead, but then a respect for going ahead and figuring it out and still doing it safely. So my perception, I've just kind of, been trying to, read as they say, read the tea leaves. That's what we do in the media business. We kind of see where the audience is going and what is the audience interested in. And so my observation is that people are reconnecting in a lot of local communities with their high school teams and their programs in a new way, in sort of a new, they're kind of reinvesting in them in a new way. And I think we're going to see that really pay dividends for these high school programs, really maybe not even this year, but in the years to come, the next 2-3 years, I think we're really going to see it grow in popularity. Not that it wasn't popular already, but I think we're going to see it grow. So high schools are off to a pretty good start. 2 weeks now into the public school season, and I guess maybe 4 weeks into the private school season. So that's kind of where we are. I'm long-winded. I talk on the radio for a reason, every day for 3 hours. So 30 minutes is nothing. So I think it's time for me to shut up and take a question or two. So y'all let me know.
Matt, this is Randy McCoy. Question about those conferences that chose not to play. Mm-hmm. I keep reading snippets of where, they may be reconsidering right now. So what's going on with those conferences as you hear?
Okay, what we're hearing right now, Randy, you're exactly right. The first two Power 5 conferences to cancel were the Big Ten and the Pac-12. So the Big Ten up in the Midwest, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and the Pac-12 out west, California, Arizona, Oregon. They were the first to go ahead and say, well, we're not going to play. And they put out some really just hot air, meaningless language to just get the hungry pack of wolves to back off a little bit, and said, well, we may play in the spring. But anybody in athletics, and Randy, you know this, would tell you, you can't play a full contact, full 3-month football season in the spring and then turn around and do it 5 months later in the fall. And so it never was a realistic deal. That was just simply, they were being chased by hungry dogs. So they threw a little piece of meat out there, just give them a stop for a minute. That's all the rumor of the spring season was. So yes, now, not the Pac-12 so much, but the Big Ten, they got so much blowback from players, coaches, and parents of players across their league. They didn't really get, I didn't think, just it didn't seem like an overwhelming amount of blowback from fans. It was sort of split 50-50, that kind of thing. But the conference and their leaders and their local politicians were just inundated with just constant negative feedback from players, coaches, and the players' parents in those states too. You shouldn't have canceled this season. And now, Randy, that the other schools and even smaller conferences have begun playing, those games are on TV. They've figured out the testing. They're managing it pretty well. All these other conferences have given athletes the right to opt out with the understanding of, look, some people just don't want to play in this environment, and that's fine. And so they've said, if you don't want to play, nobody's going to force you to. And if you don't, we will still honor your scholarship. There's going to be no penalty if you opt out. So that those that want to opt out can, no penalty, nobody's holding it against them. Those that want to play can. Now that they've seen all that working, now they've turned the wagon around and are having a vote. And the rumor was they were going to have a vote among the 14 school presidents yesterday. It didn't happen. They had a meeting, and the rumor is the meeting went well, and the last we heard is maybe they were going to vote today. So you may, by this afternoon, you may start seeing information that they voted and are going to play. The date they have circled is October the 17th for the start date of the Big Ten, and now they just have to vote on it and see if it's going to happen. Any other questions?
Hey, Matt, it's David. I'll ask the obvious question. Sorry, my head was just
Okay.
there. We were fortunate enough to have Coach Leach on a couple of weeks ago, about a month ago. Give us your overall 60-day read into him in practice. I know he's been there longer than 60 days, but just in the last 60 days, he certainly is impressive when you listen to him. And that's from an Ole Miss guy.
Yeah. Yeah, David, it's a really, really interesting dynamic of Leach, the person. Y'all heard him talk. He's about as genuine to who he is in any situation as anybody you'll find at that level. You know, at that level, coaches, and understandably so, there's always a little bit of a guard they have around them, a face shield. I know there's a pun in that these days, but you know what I mean. There's guarded. There's a certain thing they portray. They answer questions in a certain way. And really, a lot of these coaches, it's just to get past it so they can get back to coaching football sort of thing. And Mike, I've followed him all these years, even when he wasn't here. We were playing audio of his press conferences on my show in Mississippi, and he's out at Washington State. Nobody cares about what they do. It's just he's an interesting talker. He's an interesting communicator. And he's just very genuine to that. And that's been my perception too, on a personal level, 2 or 3 times of talking to him one-on-one, just in a relaxed situation, is, you know, what you see at the podium at a press conference is exactly what you see in person. The first time I interviewed him on a radio show, I don't even know how it came up, but halfway into the interview, somehow we got onto the subject of Lewis and Clark, you know, and their expedition. Well, the last 15 minutes of our interview was he and I talking about the Lewis and Clark stuff. And then after the interview was over, we texted back and forth 4 or 5 times. He sent me the title of a book he wanted me to read, and I sent him a video to watch about Lewis and Clark. And I thought, you know, we've communicated for 30 minutes, and 5 minutes of that was football. You know, you just don't get that with most coaches. So that's genuine. That's really the way he is. The reason I said it's an interesting dynamic is you go to practice, and it's old school. It is, they don't baby anybody around, and it is, and I know that you expect that, I guess, at that level, but I would just tell you, it's tough on those players. They had a couple of players that transferred immediately after they took the job and started the off-season workouts back in January, February, you know, and I was the least surprised after going and watching them. They are tough on them. I know this. And I've, you know, watching practice, watching scrimmages, you know, they may get beat. They may have teams that play better and are more talented and that kind of stuff, but they're not going to lose any games because of toughness or because of mental toughness. It's a boot camp thing that he's running out there. And you can't say that for the previous staff. My impression too is that he's got his way he's going to do it. It's worked in the past. He knows what he's doing. He's comfortable with it. And anybody that has any other opinions are welcome to have those, but he doesn't care. He's going to do it the way that he wants to do it. Yeah, that's my impression. Did that answer the question there a little bit?
Yeah. He seems like a very genuine. He's got a law degree, history degree. He's a smart, educated person outside football. He just happens to have a passion for coaching. And it really was refreshing to hear the guy.
Yeah. Listen, and David, we're in for, we knew this when he and Lane Kiffin were hired in the state, that we were in for a fun ride one way or the other. But we're really in for a fun ride. There will be ups and downs at both places because, you know, right now both programs are at a place where you're not going to recruit a top 5 class every year and go out and win 10 games every year. Okay. You're going to have to be David and knock off Goliath a couple of times in a year here and there and have a really special season. You're going to have some ups and downs and dips. And, you know, as both schools try to build it to something. But both those coaches are capable of doing that. The style of football they play. People have asked me a lot, you know, what's State going to do this year? And one way that I answer it is they may lose a game they're not supposed to at some point. New stuff. Who knows with COVID, who's out this week, that week. But I can promise you, they're going to beat somebody this year they're not supposed to. That style of offense. You watch them practice. Mike has a formula that he's kind of figured out and can prove it to you mathematically that his receivers run farther during a normal practice than any other group of receivers in the country. You watch those receivers run, like Garrett Schrader, who's making the move from quarterback to receiver from Mississippi State. That happened last week, and it's the right move. He's 6'5", 225 pounds, but built like an athlete and can absolutely fly. He runs a 4.5 legitimately in a 40. And he makes these catches, and he's got this ability. But after about 2 practices, he's dead. And, he's been practicing at quarterback. But he's learning that, man, these guys run. The amount of running that those receivers get in during their normal practice, during a normal week, is just on a different level. So that's something Garrett, if he's going to play, he's just got to adjust to that running. It's going to take him 2 weeks just to get used to running that much at practice. So that's another reason they outwork people in that pass game. That's another reason the pass game works everywhere he's been. They outwork people. Lane Kiffin and Mike Leach are 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks coaches in the SEC, the third being Dan Mullen. Their track records prove that. Kiffin's going to prove that this year at Ole Miss. If he puts Corral on the field, he's going to play better than people thought he could. When he puts Plumlee out there, he's going to be a little better than he thought he could. Lane Kiffin coached Blake Sims at Alabama back in 2014. Blake Sims was a converted running back. He's 5'10", 11, played quarterback for Alabama. You'll remember that year in 2014. And under Lane Kiffin, Blake Sims, converted running back, set an Alabama all-time single-season passing record. Now, throwing the ball. As soon as his college career was over, he didn't even give a sniff by the NFL or Canada or anybody to be a pro quarterback. He's 5'11" and a converted running back. But that showed me what Kiffin is capable of doing, coaching around a guy and whatever his ability is. Both schools and both fan bases here, especially once we get it back to normal, are in for a really fun trip.
Hey, Matt.
Hey,
Tom Booth here.
How you doing, Tom?
Doing great. Hey, talk very briefly about the big differences, both good and bad, over the last 20 years for college football.
Okay. Differences. You mean on the field, Tom, or just kind of all together?
All around.
Yeah.
What you perceive as the good stuff and the bad stuff since you were playing till today. And I know that's a huge subject, but just if you've got a couple of things that jump out at you, share it with us.
Yeah, okay. Differences, good and bad. Yeah, 20 years ago, television was much different, obviously. I think that's one thing that has just kind of transformed the sport as much or more than anything else, is just the wall-to-wall television coverage. Any game you want to see, you can find it. I don't know. I mean, you've got 120 some odd Division I football playing colleges in the country. And quite literally every weekend, about 110 of those are on television. You go 20 years ago, that's not the case. Even in the late 90s, when television started to grow, and in 98, we started playing. I was a junior in college in 98. We started playing in that 8 p.m. time slot on ESPN2. And everybody's like, we're playing football at 8 o'clock, and now that's prime time now, So the television coverage has really just multiplied. And the positive to that, I think, Tom, is it's great for the fans. You just have options. And there's competition, for your eyes. That's great for the fans. The negative part of that is we've seen a steady, not drastic, but a steady decline over time in attendance in stadiums across the entire country. The big schools. Alabama renovating their stadium to remove some general seating and turn that into premium seating, right? Kentucky did it about 5 years ago. Kentucky used to have a 78,000 capacity. They lowered it down to about 69,000 several years ago, took out a bunch of general seating, put in premium seating. We're going to see that all over Michigan. We're going to see that all over the place. And the reason is has been a constant battle going on, especially in the last decade, for schools and programs getting people on campus versus them staying at home and enjoying the TV viewing experience at home. And it's just hard for them to compete against. I can sit in my house, watch 8 games in a comfortable chair in the air conditioning, eat food out of my own refrigerator, and I can save that $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 that I would spend this year tailgating up there on campus 7 weekends out of the year. And so that's, television has changed the sport as much as anything else. And Tom, look for this. Y'all keep your eyes on this. I'm not smart enough to come up with a real sure enough theory, but I got a feeling what's going to happen this year. They've already been fighting that, the home viewing experience. Come to campus. It's just better here. You get things here you don't get at home. We'll lower ticket prices, and we'll put in Wi-Fi in the stadium, and we'll lower the concession prices. But people still gravitating towards staying home. Well, this year, they can't come, right? David, you can't go to the Grove. No tailgating. Randy, you can't go to the Junction. No tailgating. You can't go to the game. Even if you wanted to. Let's say you're someone who for 15 years, you've gone to all 7 home games and tailgated and sat in those seats. Well, now you can't go. So what I want to know is, what is the percentage of the fan bases who for the first time in a while are at home? They can't go. So they're at home. And so now they're watching the game on their outdoor television on the back porch by the grill, okay? Use their own bathroom, eat their own food, watch 3 or 4 games if they want to. If the game gets boring, I turn it off, save the gas money. What percentage of the fans are going to say, you know what? I actually like this better. I'm not going back. They can open it up in November if they want to. I'm not going up there. I like this better. I don't know what that percentage is, but I know there is a percentage of those people who are going to do that. So the schools who've already been fighting a gradualing, just kind of this migration towards the home viewing experience are now going to have to replace that percentage altogether. They're not coming back. What is that percentage? Because now that money and those resources and that time that they'd spend with football are now, they're going to spend it on fishing trips, skiing trips, camping trips, fixing a driveway, putting on a new roof, all that stuff. And so I have a feeling that because of television, Tom, like we've talked about, combined with a pandemic, forcing people to stay home, there's a big portion that are going to decide, you know what, I can do just fine without it. And I don't know what the stadiums are going to look like. Let's say we wake up in 2021, we can believe that people are really hungry to go back to a game. Well, they may go to one, but there's a big portion of those that next year, they're only going to go to one. They're not going to go to 7. And so what is that going to mean for attendance and for schools? I think we'll see we're going to see a lot of that happen, I believe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Matt, this is Ron Ashby. I've got one observation and a question. Based on just Saturday, it appears the Big 12 Conference aren't playing football this year.
That's
my
right.
question is, does the SEC have a conference-wide consistent position on the fans in the state or in the stands? And the reason I ask that, ACC, you can have people in the stands in Florida, but not in North Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Right. Ron, this is my understanding. There are some blanket mandates from the conference level that regarding how the schools have to operate inside the stadium, regardless of how many fans they're letting in. They have certain distancing measures. Like the conference put out this long list about 2.5 weeks ago, and it's on their website, secsports.com. You can go read the whole thing. They have stuff about masks. Like every school has to require fans that, if you're moving around the stadium, you must have a mask on, and all these different things. They've got things about concessions, like how every school has to operate their concession stands when they have people there. But the numbers, the attendance numbers, they have left that up. The schools are subject to their own states, their own state governments, right? And that's why we had the big deal. What was it, a week ago, I guess, maybe 2 weeks ago, when Tate Reeves in Mississippi said, okay, what we're going to do is 25% capacity, at these big venues. Well, it's 25% here. A different example would be like, I think Texas, I don't know if Texas has changed it, but I do know that there was a strong feeling in Texas that their state government, by the time the season rolled around, was going to have it at 50%. And I don't know if they have or not, but that would just be an example. If they did that, Texas A&M would be allowed to have up to 50% of their stadium, because that's what the local government said, their state government. So the capacity number, whatever that percentage is, it's up to the state you're in. A lot of the other stuff, like how you're going to operate your stadium, how many gates you're going to open, getting fans in and out, wearing masks in the stadium, distancing, the way you seat them, the SEC has handed down a list of mandates on that. But there's not a uniform attendance number across the conference. That's up to the states. And you're right, the Big 12 would have been just as well off not playing this past week, huh? They go 0-3 against the Sun Belt. Sun Belt whipped up on them. Sure did.
Hey, Matt, it's Benton again.
Hey, Benton.
If Costello goes down, is the freshman ready to jump in there?
Yeah, I believe so. What Benton's talking about, for those that don't know, KJ Costello, transfer from Stanford, is Mississippi State's starting quarterback. As long as he's up on 2 feet and breathing and kicking and ready to go, he'll be your quarterback in that first game. And so the backup job at this point has been won, as Benton says, by the freshman Will Rogers from Brandon High School. He's a true freshman. He was starting quarterback at Brandon High School this time last year. I believe, Benton, he is ready to go. Just watching him, he's way, way further ahead on some certain things than a normal freshman would be. One is he played in a system under his dad at Brandon High School. They use the same terminology, run the same kind of plays and everything as the Mike Leach air raid offense. They went and got all the information and stuff at the Mike Leach coaching clinics over the years and brought that back and installed it. And Will Rogers ran it at Brandon in the last 3 years. So when he got to state, he was already, versed on, how you call plays, how they do the snap count, and how they read this particular route, how they read it. He had a leg up. So he was probably more familiar with all that stuff. Well, a lot more familiar with all that stuff than the quarterbacks who were already on campus, and Garrett Schrader and Jalen Maiden. The other thing is he's a little bigger than people realize, 6'2"-ish, about 210 pounds, and is naturally accurate with the football. From a coaching standpoint, Benton, if I go watch him, and I've said this, the practices I've been to, Neil and I stand and watch, and I'll tell him and kind of point it out. He's got the best, mechanics of any of the throwers, including KJ. And tight mechanics, consistent mechanics is what leads to accuracy. So he's very accurate with the football. And he's not a escape guy and go run and make plays with your legs kind of quarterback. And that's really what Mike Leach wants in this offense. He wants a guy in the pocket getting the ball to everybody else. He didn't want you running out of there trying to do stuff with your legs. So that's a big reason why he's won the backup job, and pretty much the reason why Garrett Schrader has moved to receiver. But I'll tell you this, Benton, I know he's a true freshman, but if he has to run out there and play and be your starter, I wouldn't be scared to see it, and I think his teammates would be just fine. I think they know he can do it.
I knew they had to be comfortable with it to let Schrader move to wide receiver.
Right. Because, you'd think, well, they might keep Schrader at quarterback just to hedge their bets a little bit here if KJ were to roll his ankle and you're on the road at Baton Rouge, but the kid has some it to him. Will Rogers does. Players love him. He's really accurate with the football, smart, sharp. If he goes in there, they've got confidence they can go win with him.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Matt, I want to thank you for being a Rotary speaker today.
My
I'm
pleasure.
72, I think, the last time I looked at it. When I talk to my contemporaries, and we all love to talk about it, but my age group is pretty much turned off completely with the pros and the college, with the politics that's now being displayed. And I know you can't say anything one way or another, but I just think that might be a lot of people that I'm talking to are thinking about maybe not continuing sending money in and doing something else on their time.
Yeah.
I didn't know if you've heard anything like that in your close conversations with friends.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I've heard about it. Every athletics director, in the Southeastern Conference has gotten, in one shape, form, or fashion, Jeff, they've gotten emails from alumni who don't like it and who, are questioning whether they ought to support and all that kind of stuff. So they're all dealing with that, and I think one difference is, if you look at the sizes of the fan bases overall, you look at a place like, say, Mississippi State. If John Cohen got, let's just pick out a number. If he got, let's say, 15,000 emails on angry, or let's just say it was 5,000, then what is the guy at Alabama going to get? Is he going to get 50,000 emails in his inbox? Well, he might, with the size of their fan base. Or if you're looking at Kentucky basketball, it could be different there. So, yeah, I think there's, there's certainly some angst. Jeff, my observation is I would tell you there's certainly some angst at every school among the leaders there of, on one hand, you have young athletes and very diverse student bodies. If you looked at just in terms of diversity and ethnicity, Mississippi State has the most diverse student body of any of the 14 SEC schools. So on that hand, you have a certain age group and demographic and person you deal with. And then a lot of times in the alumni base, those demographics are different. And so, there's a lot of angst there, for sure. I think that's just the reality of it.
Matt, this is Zell. Just
Hey,
wanted
Zell.
to ask, how are you?
Great.
Great. Just wanted to ask, you hadn't said, how do you think State's going to fall in the ranking of the conference this year?
Okay. Yeah. Ms. Long, I think that they're going to be better in several ways than people think. I have to be careful too when I answer it, because I, like a lot of people, I have this sort of inferiority complex that I have to fight being a Mississippi State guy, because I know that at State, to get their attention, to get like the people at ESPN and the people in the SEC network, to get their attention, you have to earn every bit of it, and that's just the way it is here. We're not like Tennessee or Notre Dame where they're going to rank us high and then watch us fall every year. Like we're right at Six Flags. They put us up here and then every year. State, we got to go earn it. So I fight that. But I will say, realistically, they are better than people realize. State's personnel on offense is a lot better than people realize. That quarterback, with that running back, their offensive line is experienced. They have a couple of guys on the offensive line who will play NFL football. Their pass catcher group at State is a lot better than people realize. They hadn't had a chance to show what they could do the last couple of years. They couldn't throw it. Didn't have a plan. They weren't really coached to. They hadn't had much of an opportunity to show what they could do. And they're going to show it this year. So they're going to score on everybody they play. But defensively, they're young. They're going to have some games where they really can't stop people defensively. They're not going to be bad on defense, but they're just going to be young and inexperienced. So, Ms. Law, I think they're going to have they're going to beat somebody they're not supposed to at some point. It may be the first week. They're going to have a game or two. They're going to have one in there they lose and they're not supposed to, probably. So I think if they play all 10 games, you're probably looking at 5-5. I think they're right down the middle, which would really this year is going to put them not in the bottom of the league, but kind of in that middle ground right there in year one under a new coach. If they play all 10, I think they go 5-5. The thing is, though, I don't think anybody's going to play all 10 games. Every school at some point is going to have a postponement, either because of quarantine on their team or having a quarantine on the opposing team. Games will get pushed back. And at some point, there will be enough pushbacks that there won't be a way to get them all made up. I'm pretty confident of that. So what the actual record is, I don't know. Everybody's going to play a different number of games. But I think State will be right in the middle of the pack. They're going to be better than some people think, though.
Sounds great. They're starting out tough first game.
That's it. Welcome to the SEC, Mike Leach. You know, get your first game. Why don't you head on down to Baton Rouge and see how that goes for you, you know? But LSU loses a lot. They lost their co-offensive coordinator, who was their passing game coordinator off last year's team. Their defensive coordinator now, the head coach at Baylor. Their quarterback, who's had just a season unlike any quarterback we've ever seen, who's now the starting quarterback of the Bengals, who lost yesterday. Plus about 30 to 35 other players off last year's team who have either, one, been drafted, two, left early to try to go to the NFL, or three, have opted out. And they've had a few suspensions also. So their roster is completely different, completely made over versus last year. So they're going to struggle. You know, they have recruited very well. Maybe they beat State week 1. It'll be a more competitive game than some people think. But in my opinion, this LSU team against Alabama, you know, against Florida, they have no chance this year.
Hey, Benton, it's David. I've got one more question. When I was at Ole Miss, you know, you had the athletic dorms, right, where the players stayed and they ate together and the coaches could be there and they had people supervising them. Do you think that COVID, and given the world that we're living in, where kids are fine when they're at class, kids can be fine when they're at practice, but then they go 15,000 different directions, do you see a day, or this being an opportunity for the schools to kind of have a little more say in where the kids live, or is that ship already sailed? Because to me, that's one of the biggest challenges, trying to keep the kids somewhat sane during the season and not going out, nobody's watching them.
You know what, David? It is a great point, because if every coach and every program right now had their way, you'd have every player living under the same roof. You'd buy out an entire hotel and say, this is ours. Nobody else comes in for the next 3 months. Just that's what they do if they could. But, and here's the thing, I hate it when the lawyer stuff comes in, because I'm not one and I don't understand it that well, but I'm learning to think that way because they have to contend with this. In 1996, the NCAA passed this legislation, you remember, that said very specifically for the health and wellness of these student athletes, they have to be treated the same as a regular student who's not an athlete. Meaning, once they get past that freshman year, you must allow them to make their own decision of live off campus or on campus. You cannot have an athletic dorm. You can't feed them, this way. You got to do it this way, So when they did that in 96, and it's never changed. So the fact that it's still there, unless they go in and change it, they're going to have a hard time convincing themselves they could get away with it. Even right now in a pandemic, they could get away with going, okay, y'all all come back, get out of your releases for your apartments, and you're all going to live under this dorm under one roof. And oh, by the way, our strength and conditioning coach is going to live on the first floor, right by the exit. I think that because of that, they'd have a hard time getting away with it. Now, your question was, does it give them a chance? Does it open a door? Yeah. I would almost bet you that they're already having those conversations, trying to see if they could, amend that in this special situation, it would allow them to do something different next year. But that's one thing they're going to have to overcome. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for Matt?
Matt, this is Ron Ashby again. Just to change the subject a little bit, any thoughts on the top candidates for the Southern Miss head coaching position?
Yes. To me, what makes the most sense is Will Hall, Amory native. Will, in terms of a coach, he's got that it, he had it, whatever it is, he had it as a quarterback. He's got it as a coach too and a recruiter. Now, he's absolutely a legitimate candidate from the school's perspective. Whether or not he gets the job, I don't know. I guess it's early, and they're not under any kind of big hurry with the financial strain they're under at Southern Miss, and now going to go through a year with an interim head coach who's 30 years old. Because if they go play 11 more games with this interim head coach and he goes and wins 9 of them and they beat UAB and go to the Conference USA Championship game or something, they're going to want to go ahead and pay him to continue being their coach. So they're not in any big hurry at all. Will is, I think, and should be at the top of that list. People have brought up Hugh Freeze's name. The thing about that is Freeze is already making $2 million a year at Liberty. Jay Hobson was making $500,000 a year at Southern Miss. And I just think in a lot of ways, that's just not a fit. It doesn't make any sense either way. And so you're probably looking at Will Hall, the offensive coordinator. His last name is Dunn, D-U-N-N, up at Oklahoma State. And I think Larry Fedora, who's now the offensive coordinator at Baylor, I think it's a legitimate chance to maybe get him back, to have him back if they decide to go that route. But they're not going to do anything on that front until after this season plays out with their interim.
All right. Well, Matt, thank you so much. We're up against 1 o'clock. Not to cut you off, really enjoy it. Great job. Appreciate you being here, Shelley. Great job. Thank you.